way. That's true. Some people will say, oh, there's the 10 Commandments. As Phil said, the 10 Commandments. But in fact, there is a fence around those 10 Commandments. And that's based on the whole idea of seeing to it that you don't break, that you put added stringencies so as not to cross the line. Now, why is that important? It's important when we get down to the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm going to add certain texts here in a minute. You know, it's very, very interesting. I just said that we have high carbon monoxide levels. So on the one hand, we have the door open, and the other hand, I have an electric heater, and then I'm wearing my my jacket. So we will of course survive. So the Sermon on the Mount is probably one of the most famous sections, and I'm going to see. How do I do this now? I want to move you. Let me minimize you. Exit full screen. Okay, and now let me see. I'm going to get rid of that. You've seen that. And now I want to get to my desktop. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Okay, let's see. Pardon my, okay. Oh, shoot. Are you still there, everybody?
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Still here? Okay. So now I want to pull this down. I wish I was more savvy with all this stuff. And now I want to go back to screen share. Why can't I see screen share? There we go. Screen share.
We did it before.
Can you see any? Can you?
No, not yet.
What do you see?
Everybody.
You.
See me. Okay. I went to screen share. Oh, this is not fun. Share. Oh,
Here we go.
let me move this over here. So, what we have here is from the text. I don't know if it's way too small. Can you read it?
No,
Yes.
Okay, I can actually make it bigger, I think.
please.
No, I don't know how to do that. So this is from the book of Matthew, and so what we're told is that we have already among the Pharisees where they alleviated harsh prescriptions. So, for instance, we know that the Pharisees said, you know, this business of killing an incorrigible son, of stoning an incorrigible son, nobody believes that. We don't do that. It was simply meant for educational purposes. we already know that among the Pharisees, they took sometimes the literal text and they said, that's never how it's been interpreted. So we have to be careful when we look at the literal text. So what we have here is where Jesus speaks. Sermon on the Mount is sort of Jesus on the mountain, but it's not a written. It's sort of an oral sermon that he gives. And so if you look at verse 17, and this becomes very important, there's a sense that Jesus comes to abrogate the Torah. While the Torah is harsh and legal, Jesus comes, and Jesus is very the Torah is the Torah of law, and Jesus is the Torah of mercy. But here you see from verse 17 that was not Jesus' intent. Think not that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. All right, that's a very important statement, right? For truly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Whoever then relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches men shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But he who does them and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus tells us what his purpose is. His purpose is not to cancel the law. His purpose is to enforce the law, and the law is very important. These are. It's usually called this Sermon on the Mount. These statements are called the antithesis, but they are, in other words, statements or oppositions. But they are absolutely not statements of oppositions, right? I hope that those of you who worked who. So let's look at. So there are six statements. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, all but 5, are where Jesus takes the law and extends it. So let's see how that works. So here's verse 21. You have heard that it was said to the men of old, you shall not kill. Well, actually, that's a bad translation because it should be that lo tirtzach is not kill, but murder, because there's certain kind of killing that certainly is permitted. The killing of animals to eat, the killing in war is permitted. So killing and actually in self-defense. So the translation really should be and this is from the 10 Commandments, right? This is commandment number 6. You shall not kill, and wherever kills shall be, and whoever kills shall be liable to judgment. I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be liable in judgment. Whoever insults his brother, what's the matter? Are you okay?
My car is dead.
Oh, we need to take my car.
Yes, please.
Oh, goodness.
What was that voice?
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Good.
One of
Sorry, household issues.
the no.
But I say to you, verse 22, everyone who is angry with his brother shall be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother shall be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool shall be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift. Make friends quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge and the judge to the guard and you be put in prison. Truly, I say to you, you will never get out till you have paid the last penny. So, somebody want to suggest what is thou shalt? He's taking the sixth commandment, and now he's not abrogating it; he is extending it. Right? Not only shall you not murder, but you shouldn't be angry. You shouldn't carry a grudge. It shouldn't get to the point of getting so angry that you want to murder somebody. You should be compassionate. But before you get to that level of anger, you should be compassionate, even to the point of if you're supposed to bring a sacrifice and you have an issue with your brother, don't offer the sacrifice. Don't go take care of the ritual. Take care of your brother first. Anybody with me? Anybody have any questions?
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Not so much on that point, but before he mentioned heaven, was the concept of heaven common in those days?
Well, as I think I mentioned one of the earlier times, in Hebrew at least, the word heaven and the word sky are the same word, shamayim. So we don't use, we divide those two words, right? Sky is the physical, and heaven is sort of a religious term, right? Sky is where the stars are, and the sun, the moon, and heaven is where the angels are. But in Hebrew, and I don't know about Greek, there is no two words for that. So I don't know how to answer your question because I really don't know. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So you have heard that it was said, verse 27, you shall not commit adultery. But I said, so where does you shall not commit adultery come from? Ten Commandments, right?
Yeah.
By the way, let's talk about adultery for a minute. In Jewish tradition, what is the definition of adultery?
Married woman having relationship with other than her husband.
Very good. Everybody hear that?
Yeah.
So since the Torah presumes polygamy, a man may have sexual relations with more than one woman and it not be called adultery. But if a woman who is married has relations with a man not her husband, they have both committed adultery, and according to the Torah, both are subject to the death penalty. Okay, so let's go back here. You have heard what it was said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery and with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and throw it away. It is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand, I'm not sure what they're talking about here, but use your imagination. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. And I'll have to go to the next, we'll stop there for a minute. So in other words, you are not, so what is he saying? By the way, this brings up one of my favorite stories that I've told many, many times. And that has to do about Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter,
Everybody
yeah,
remember?
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Right? I think it was in a Playboy interview.
Yes.
We're talking about at least 25 years ago.
Mhm.
Jimmy Carter admitted that he lusted in his heart,
Right.
that he committed this very basic sin. Where does it come from? Comes from right here. That he lusted in his heart. That was something that was either not in his control or he wasn't very good about that. And when Jews read that, of course, we all have subscriptions to Playboy. And when Jews read that, we laughed, right? Because what Jesus is saying is, what leads to adultery?
Dance.
Lust leads to adultery. So how do you prevent adultery? You put a fence around the Torah. You go one step back, and even lust is prohibited. Now, for Jews, the issue is not thoughts in your head, but actions. So here he's done it again. He's taken the law and he has made it stronger. Okay, so now
I have a question, Rabbi.
Yep.
This comes from the book of Matthew.
Yes.
Is Matthew literally quoting Jesus, or is Matthew making it up as he goes along?
We have no idea. Mark is the earliest one of the
The writers, yeah.
Of the Gospels. Mark is earliest, and then comes Matthew. Neither one knew Jesus.
Mhm.
And certainly when we get to Luke and to John, they were even further away. How is this transmitted? Are these actual quotes of Jesus? If you are a devout Christian, this is an absolute quote. In the same way that anybody who suggests that the Torah, in the form that we have it, did not come from Moses, is the same kind of heretic. So I'm going to. I think I have to stop screen share. I have to do another same thing. 1 second.
You stopped it.
I'm going to move you guys over.
You're not
Come on.
backing up the
Move you
computer.
guys over. I'm going to get rid of this.
It's not supposed to be plugged in.
Aren't you backing it up?
I don't back it up there. I don't back it
And
up.
I'm
I'm
gonna-
gonna plug it in when I back it up.
It needs to be backed up.
I'm going to go to this one. And I'm going to turn that around.
I understand.
Can you turn it around? Yeah.
I know.
There we go.
It is.
And now I'm going to push this on the side. And now I want to.
Insult to injury.
Lost my-
Far enough.
Okay. Now I want to screen share again.
Now he has to get a new heater.
Okay. Share.
Dogs to have it fixed.
Seems to be wondering.
Okay. Can you see that?
He needs to replace it.
Part
Yeah.
of it.
I see something, yeah.
Move it over a little.
Okay. I moved it over and now I'm
Good.
going to go to the top. I'm getting so good at this. So this better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go to hell. That's still on that one. Now, the next one, we went from murder to adultery, and now we're going to a related area to adultery, which is not from the Ten Commandments, because you see it says, it was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. Where do we know that from? Anybody know?
To get. Yeah, it's,
Right, but it's written directly in the 24th chapter of Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy, in the Ten Commandments, there's no mention of divorce. But in Deuteronomy 24, it says, if a man finds something called ervat davar in his wife, he may divorce her by handing her a bill of divorcement, a get kritut. And they are then divorced. But then it goes on to say that he may go and marry again. They may both go and marry again. But should his second wife die, or should he divorce his second wife, he may not go ahead and remarry the first wife again. Okay? So actually, if he divorces his wife and then remarries the same wife, that's okay. But if he has a second wife in between, he may not go back to the first wife.
Intervening circumstance.
Do we have anybody have any examples of movie stars or famous people who were married, got divorced, and went back to their first spouse again?
Larry King.
He had 9 wives, right?
Right, but he had one that he did twice, but there was somebody in between.
Oh my goodness, a Jew on top of it. So that's the only thing we know about divorce in the Torah, is this about 4 lines in the first beginning of chapter 24 of so divorce is mentioned. There's no value judgment placed on it in the Torah. The only thing that's of question is, what are grounds for divorce? And the only thing that it says in the Torah is that if he finds ervat davar, which we have no idea what that means. Erva is something disgusting, perhaps. So if you in the chapter they talked about the difference between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Anybody remember the difference?
yeah.
Beit Shammai says that only for unchastity, if she is unfaithful, is a grounds for divorce. Beit Hillel says very interestingly, I would quote it differently than she did in the book, even if she burns his soup.
Just what?
Suit.
What do you think Beit Hillel is saying?
Pretty much you can divorce for anything.
That I'll tell you my interpretation. We don't understand this whole business of marriage and divorce. We don't know why it works in some cases and it doesn't work in other cases. And we're not going to get in the middle of it.
Mm.
So even if she burns the soup, we're not going to fiddle around with grounds for divorce. If these two people don't belong together, they should get divorced. And then, of course, one part that I didn't realize is she quotes Rabbi Akiva, very famous Rabbi Akiva. And what does Rabbi Akiva say? Even if he finds somebody prettier.
That we know from movie stars.
I think it's not just movie stars, so here we have, that's the Jewish view of divorce. I actually had a great grandmother, my mother's father's mother, my great grandmother, who lived to 106. She died in 1970. She was born in 1864. In other words, this great grandmother was born during the Civil War. Of course, she didn't know about the Civil War because she was born in Germany, and she was just born then. But This great grandmother was divorced from a man named David. What their grounds for divorce were, I don't know. Very unusual that my grandfather was born in 1889, so maybe 1890, 1891, 1992, they got divorced. And the only when my parents and my uncle were when they were got married and wanted to have children, the only request that my grandfather had was, don't name him David, interestingly. And of course, my uncle named his child David. So my cousin, I have a cousin named David. So here it was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. That's really what it says from the Torah. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of unchastity, makes her an adulteress. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So again, what he's doing is he's making another fence around the Torah. It says in the Torah that if you get divorced, you have to give her a certificate. But I'm saying divorce, the whole business of divorce is wrong. Right? Because it says in Genesis that I don't remember the exact quote, out of two people become one when they get married. How do they, what kind of mess is this that people get married? They put their destinies together, and then they decide, no, I don't want to be married anymore. I'm going to get divorced, and I may marry somebody else. So Jesus goes ahead and says, I'm going even further than the possibility of divorce. Divorce itself is wrong. Boy, has this created a lot of trouble for the church.
It's coming around.
Where, yes, as a matter of fact, the Catholic Church, which was very strong on this, created a way around this, and that's one of the things that religious law does often, is find a way around things, and they've created annulments.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what the rules are for an annulment, but you have to. It's a very long procedure to be able to. Now we also have problems with divorce, right? You're familiar with our problems of divorce? Divorce, it says in Deuteronomy, is when a husband hands his wife a document. In other words, divorce is only a one-way procedure. According to the strict reading of the Torah, a divorce there's a divorce procedure that can only be initiated by the husband, cannot be initiated by the wife. So in point of fact, we have husbands who have held their wives up. They have said, I will only give you a divorce if you give me custody of the children, or I will only give you a divorce if you give me a large sum of money. This remains a big problem within the Orthodox community. Of course, the other issue, there are several issues, but the other issue in Jewish law is that when two Jews get married, they get married under Jewish law, and if they get married here in the United States, they're getting married by the laws of the state. Many people we have because of this passage. The rules in the United States are you can get married civilly or religiously or both, but you get divorced civilly. That creates a problem for Judaism, because if you get divorced civilly, you are still married Jewishly. But why do you get divorced only civilly? Because the church didn't recognize divorce. So it's not infrequent that a couple gets divorced civilly. They're not familiar with Jewish law and Jewish tradition. They now come to a rabbi with either the husband or the wife comes to the rabbi and says, I want to get married. The rabbi says, is this a first marriage? And one or both say, no, this is not a first marriage, this is a second marriage. Are you widowed or divorced? And they say, I'm divorced. And you say, do you have a get? And what's the response to that?
What's the get?
What's a get?
Dead.
Right?
Yes.
So in point of fact, you have to explain what a get is. And now very often people have been divorced for a long time. And now you have to tell them you are still married according to Jewish law, and we have to go have a get prepared in the name of the husband, and have it transmitted. And we still do that to this day.
What, is that what they do in Israel? I don't-
Yes.
Yes, in Israel, they only have religious divorce.
Absolutely.
As a matter of fact, there's a horrible, horrible movie about divorce in Israel called Get, in which the religious authority, which is, in Israel, marriage and divorce are controlled exclusively by the religious authority. Here, marriage and divorce is actually controlled by the civil authority. So if you want to get married and you're Jewish, if you're Christian or Muslim, you go someplace else. But if you're Jewish, you have to get married, get a license from the rabbinate. And then when you want to get divorced, you have to go back to the rabbinate and you have to go through a whole procedure with the rabbinate. And the rabbinate will not, has certain means at its disposal, but they cannot force a man to give his wife a get. And it's a huge problem in Israel among, and so non-religious Israelis have to go through the same issue. They have to go, there is no such thing as civil marriage in Israel, and there is no such thing as civil divorce in Israel. Now, many people get around the issue of religious marriage by going to Cyprus,
All I see on the screen is the top of your head.
and they get married in Cyprus. And therefore they avoid the whole business. It's if you get married outside of Israel, marriage outside of Israel is recognized in Israel, but I have no idea. Barbara, do you know if somebody wants to get divorced in Israel, can they do that outside and have it recognized?
Go. Yes, if you get divorced in the United States, I believe that it's recognized in Israel. No, it isn't. Not if you want to. You have to have a get if you want to get remarried in Israel.
Right.
But
So,
what
yep.
the young people are doing today is they're bypassing the rabbinate completely, not going to Cyprus necessarily, but just having a civil ceremony. And so it's not recognized by the rabbinate, even though they say they're married and our nephew's wedding, they had their friends Spain or something
You're fading.
over their divorce because
Yeah.
the rabbinate never recognized their
It's-
so that's how
It's a big
they
issue in
the
Israel.
father.
Yeah, and we have a nephew who grew up in Israel who wanted to marry a divorced woman, and they went to Cyprus. But
You know
that-
why?
Yes,
Because if they were it was your husband's family,
yes,
because they're Kohanim,
right.
and a Kohen may not marry a divorcee.
On the other hand, my late brother, Halav Shalom, could not get remarried in the United States until his get in Israel became final and was certified translated. We
Wow.
had the final document, but for some reason the embassy was delayed in certifying it, and it was not accepted for the civil authorities in New Jersey for his remarriage.
So we have issues within the Jewish community about issues of marriage and divorce, but this section is why in the United States, marriage, it can be religious or civil, but divorce in the United States is only a civil proceeding. And an awful lot of Jews who get divorced don't realize that they remain married to their without having a get. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So that's number 3. This is number 4. Now, verse 33. Again, you have heard that it was said to the men of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. Now, what do we have about oaths and swearing in Jewish law?
Comes Yom Kippur, the unfulfilled oaths get rejected.
Well, first of all, oaths are very important. Not only are they very important, they must be fulfilled.
Mhm.
And they're really, a couple of different kinds of oaths that people make. Sometimes it is it's today we say if it's not in writing, it doesn't count. Well, that's not the case in Jewish law.
Right.
I fear that I have at least one, if not more, attorneys here that in Judaism, one's word is sacrosanct. We have then other kinds of issues about women making vows or oaths. A married woman who makes an oath or a vow, that oath or vow can be abrogated by her husband. If a unmarried woman makes a vow or an oath, her vow can be abrogated by her father. A widowed or divorced woman, her oath cannot be abrogated. That doesn't mean it has to be abrogated, but it can be abrogated. But oaths are very important. And in Jewish tradition, we are encouraged not to make oaths,
But
not to make vows.
what about Kol Nidra on Yom Kippur?
That's right. Well, that was what Phil was referring to as well. So, rabbis actually, the Kol Nidra was a very controversial prayer. Many rabbis tried to get rid of it. They couldn't get rid of it. And in Kol Nidre, the original version is really very problematic. And we still use the original version, which is all vows and oaths and promises that I make from this year until next year, I declare null and void. Our assumption is that the Kol Nidre comes from the Spanish Inquisition. When Jews made oaths to convert to Christianity that they didn't mean. Nevertheless, it's controversial because it was used over the centuries by anti-Semites to say you can't trust a Jew. They go to synagogue and they any promises they make they get rid of them. First of all, the oaths from Kol Nidre are only oaths between a human being and God. In other words, if I make an oath that I will pay you $10,000, And I say, I went to synagogue on Yom Kippur. I don't owe you anything anymore. That doesn't count. These are only oaths that somebody makes. As a matter of fact, did anybody see last night the show on the Black Church
Oh, no.
on NPR? There was a wonderful show with the professor from Harvard. What's his name?
Gates. Gates.
Yes.
Gates.
Gates.
And evidently, he was somebody who grew up in the church. And I don't remember what the issue was, but he said, I think his mother was very ill. And so he made an oath that if she gets better, I will go to church regularly. Well, his mother got better. He says, "Oh God, now I'm in trouble." So that was in the program actually last night. If you have a chance to see it, I urge you to see it. It was on PBS. Okay, so that's number 4. Here's number 5. Again, you have heard, verse 33. Again, you have heard that it was said to the men of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, and do not make one hair white or black." I don't know what that really means. "Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil." You get yourself in trouble when you make oaths. And that's, by the way, a Jewish tradition. However, in the Talmud, there were many times when people took oaths in a court. If someone accused someone of misusing property, and they said, "I did not misuse the property," it broke on its own. And that's probably not a good example. But if it was something that could not be proven, one of the ways that the court allowed people was to make an oath. So people took oaths in the court. Let me see. Now we want to go down. I'm going to skip number 5 for a second and go to number 6.
Well, wasn't that what Martin Luther was protesting about? That the church was handing out get out of jail free cards in the form of oaths?
No. That was people were buying indulgences. I think that's what you were referring to.
That's what I'm referring to.
And Martin Luther said this is part of the corruption of the church. So I'm skipping 30 for a second from 38 and going down to 43. We're going to come back to 38 because that's the biggest one. 43, you have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same, etc., etc." By the way, so does the Torah says you shall love your neighbor, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? That it says in Leviticus, but it does not say hate your enemy.
Correct.
Nowhere in the Torah does it say hate your enemy, but he's using that for polemic purposes, and he's saying, no, you shouldn't. You should love your neighbor and love your enemy. Now let's go back here to 38, which is the 5th of 6. And this is the hardest one. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist one who is evil. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your coat, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to him who begs from you, and do not refuse him who would borrow from you. This is now not an extension. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is in the Torah. It comes from Hammurabi. And it actually appears in the Torah 3 times. It appears in Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. It is seen as the most brutish and emblematic part of Jewish law. But how is it understood in Jewish tradition? First of all, if someone is injured, that person has to be compensated, and he should be justly compensated, not too much, not too little. The rabbis always understood this as monetary compensation and not poking out an eye. What is I wrote it down. What is Tevye's from Fiddler on the Roof? An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That way the whole world will be blind and toothless. Right, so, but this is not an extension of the law, right? This is not, somehow this is something different, and I've seen many different interpretations, but I say to you, do not resist one who is evil, but if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Does anybody know how and I've now seen this interpretation a couple of places. Why the right cheek? Why the right cheek? Because the right cheek, how do you strike somebody on the right cheek? If you're right-handed, you strike somebody on the right cheek with the back of your hand, which was seen as a way to humiliate somebody. What is the response? One could fight back, an eye for an eye. One could do nothing, but being stricken like this, which is a humiliating act, turn to him the other also, is a kind of defending, the claim is that's defending your honor. And if someone would sue you and take your coat, anybody have a good interpretation of what we're talking about here? Let him have your cloak as well.
Wasn't that pawning garments for subsistence?
Well, we have a law, certainly in the Torah, that if you borrow somebody's garment, you must return it by the evening, because perhaps it is the person's only garment, and you may not keep it overnight. But I don't know exactly, there are a couple of interpretations here, but it's all of these are a way of that if someone sues you and takes your coat is also a means of humiliation. And now the response could be to sue him back. Actually, I have a. Where is it? Here's. Is that verse 40? Yeah. An interesting example has been given to us by Dr. Moses Aberbach in discussing the whole concept of revenge as distinct from bearing a grudge. Posits, here's the situation that he posits. Two men, agricultural workers, one of whom asks to borrow a sickle and is refused. The one who refused the next day asked the would-be borrower for a loan of an axe. Right? First one says, "Can I borrow your sickle?" And the other one says, "No." Then he comes back, the one who wanted to borrow, and now and the other one comes back and says, "Can you loan me an axe?" And he says, "No, obviously you didn't give me a sickle yesterday, so I'm not going to give you an axe today." He is refused on the score that he himself refused the loan of the sickle. That concluded the judgment was retaliation, and the cases are wholly congruous. But if one man who has refused the loan of an axe next day asks the would-be borrower if he may have a loan of a garment, and his request is granted with the words, "Here it is, I am not like you, who would not lend me an axe," then that is bearing a grudge. This is striking in that a garment is not a likely object to be loaned or borrowed. And he goes, the example may go back. The point is that these are some of the most famous lines, and it's seen as contrast. Jews in the Torah believe in an eye for an eye, but we believe in turning the other cheek. Now, you can't run a legal system that's based on turn the other cheek, because you got to have some way of adjudicating justice. So this is a very problematic section.
But Rabbi, wasn't the whole idea of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount to say that we Christians, if you will, have much more, we're much more lenient with people or people who transgress than the Jews, quote unquote, who were more punishment oriented. So the whole idea of the Sermon on the Mount being a more humane way of dealing with people.
Yes, that is but as you can see, here we had 6 examples. 5 of them were clearly where Jesus takes Jewish law and makes it stricter. First of all, he comes at the beginning that we read and he says, "I am not here to abrogate the law. I am here to fulfill the law."
Yes.
So we have 5 examples where he actually makes the law stricter. You say that you can get divorced. I say divorce is illegal. And here we have this 6th one. And it's clear that the rabbis did not believe, that the Sermon on the Mount is not compassionate as compared to the legal aspect. The last section in our chapter talks about the issues of justice and mercy. That's always a big issue. Yes, if you're a religious person in a society where you have no control, you're not in charge of the courts, it's sort of very easy to be merciful, to always come down on the side But when you are in setting up a legal system with courts, then you need to be. You can be merciful, but you must start with a sense of what is just. And I think that's really what this is. What this is really all about. That in fact, the tradition that Elaine mentioned, that the Christian scripture is compassionate, as opposed to the Jewish text, which is only focused on strict justice,
Yes.
is certainly not true.
Well,
We have no example that we know of where there ever was an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth. And as a matter of fact, the only one where the Torah is really absolute is in the terms of homicide. In the terms of homicide, someone who commits homicide should be executed. Except the rabbis went through a whole procedure so that capital punishment could not be carried out.
what about Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice?
Right, also mentioned.
No,
And is based on a Christian view
yes,
of Jews versus Christians.
right.
This pound of flesh. So Jesus was a product of his environment. By the way, Shakespeare never met any Jews. There were no Jews in England at that time. Jews were kicked out of England in 1292
Yes, they were.
and were not readmitted to England until
16 something or other.
16 something or around. So anything that Shakespeare knew about Jews, he knew from traditions about Jews, but not ever having met any. So in the text, she talks about the fact that people who commit adultery, both the man and the woman, are to be executed. How did the rabbis get rid of that rule?
Witnesses.
It needs witnesses. Who's committing adultery with witnesses? Not only does it need witnesses, but the people who are engaged in an adulterous relationship must be warned that what they're doing is illegal, and this is and they are subject to the following punishment. Not only that, but the people must acknowledge that they heard the warning, and nevertheless, well, what they've basically done is to say, we're not going to carry this out. How did they deal with the incorrigible son? It says of both the father and the mother must come, and they must come to the court. They also must be willing to throw the first stone. By the way, what's a son? Are we talking about a 3-year-old? Clearly not. Are we talking about a 50-year-old? No, that doesn't make sense either. So what did the rabbis decide that this law was applied to? Only somebody between the ages of 12 and a half and 13. Which of course, so the rabbis, so there is the text, and then there's what Jews did with the text. And they did not fulfill the literal meaning of the text. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that somehow we get some heat in our house. Next week is what are we dealing with next week?
Furnace is not working.
Their furnace is not working?
We're talking about blood.
Drink my blood.
Drink my blood, sacrifice and atonement.
Yuck.
Very complicated. It's a very complicated subject. So if you made an attempt to read this chapter, I hope it was an easier chapter than chapter 4. I have not read chapter 7 yet, or this was 6. So we'll see everybody next week. Anybody have any questions? Any issues?
Well, the whole
Buy a new
idea,
heater.
yeah,
Well,
I
yeah.
get the whole idea of the Christian or Jesus way of looking at life, and the Jewish way, I think, has been perpetuated through the centuries.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's important to know sort of what is it that supposedly Jesus said, if he said it at all, if there really was a Jesus, as Barbara raised the question. And what did it mean at the time? And what has it been understood to mean over the centuries? So I hope you're getting a sense of that. So we're learning a little bit about Jewish tradition as opposed to the Christian tradition as well. And now you all have to go and ask everybody that you know, what is above the ark in the main sanctuary? And why is it there?
Above the ark is a fence. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Elaine, you can't ask your husband, he already knows.
Yeah.
But the rest of you who have spouses who weren't on this can ask your spouses, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.
Good luck.
Keep warm,
Yes.
keep
You
warm,
too.
and get a vaccine appointment if you don't have one already.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Good luck with the furnace.
Yes.
Get a new one. It doesn't pay to repair an ancient one.
That's
Yeah.
right.
16 years is so ancient.
It isn't furnaces.
If you put $1,200 into it, all you're going to get is an old furnace. Period.
Yeah.
Not gonna get-
However, if you put the 1,200 into it, you get an appliance insurance policy that'll pay for it when it finally does crap out. So consider that, please.
All right. That's certainly possible.
Hey, I got a new oven that way,
Yeah.
We can leave.
so it's worth it.
Okay.
It says leave.
I know.
All right.
But he has to leave.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.